Matrico Ascar. So very excited to introduce Nwandi. So a bit about Nwandi Lawson. She has several decades of experience hosting, writing, and producing for commercial and public broadcasters, including CNN, TBS, WPBA, and Georgia Public Broadcasting, as well as for corporate and nonprofit clients through her production and media consulting companies, Reve Productions and the Virtues Collective. A native of the San Francisco Bay Area, Nwandi earned an MBA from Emory University and an undergraduate degree in journalism from Howard University. She was elected to serve 2 terms on the Board of Governors for the National Academy of Television Arts and Sciences and served as the Southeast Regional Emmy Awards judging chair. Business and Professional Women named her Georgia Women of Achievement, and she received the Southern Regional Emmy for production of the Georgia Music Hall of Fame Awards. That's really cool. After meeting members of the Bahai faith for the first time in the West African nation of Cameroon in 1999, Nwandi became a Bahai in 2001, and she's been very busy ever since. So since that time, she has served as a children's class teacher, area teaching committee secretary on local spiritual assemblies, and as an auxiliary board member and continental counselor. Her current productions and media consulting work highlight the ways that diversity, equity, and inclusion can be advanced towards true racial unity. So again, thank you all for participating today, and Nwandi, welcome.
So as we gaze upon this photo of the Continental Houses of Worship, maybe we're calling to mind this institution of the Mastrical Ascar. And as we think about devotional gatherings as the embryo of the local Mastrical Ascar, we may also be calling to mind the local and national houses of worship that are taking root in places where a vibrant pattern of community life is really emerging, where groups of people are learning to apply the revelation of Baha'u'llah to their current needs and their own circumstances. And this expression of faith through prayer, it's so much more than what we've perhaps seen in previous times. We have, of course, human experience in the history of humanity of religion as a public expression of individual salvation, or the idea perhaps of dispensing charity and good works as a matter of collective religious expression and a means for demonstrating goodness in the world. But as we go through and maybe consider just a few concepts together, we can think a little bit about what is the role of this institution of the Mastrical Ascar, one of its expressions being the devotional gathering or prayers at dawn, but ultimately its mission being to wed together worship and service in this inextricable bond. So what is it about the devotional gathering that can actually lay the foundation for a type of justice that really none of the movements of the past or present day have had the power to really lay? That is a form of justice that would be lasting and universal, and frankly, the foundation of world peace. So with that in mind, so maybe a small matter, but maybe of great, great implication. Let's take a look at what we're describing when we think about the devotional gathering as being the embryo of the local Mastrical Ascar. And that concept, at least from my perspective, emerges from this message of the 5th of January, 2015, from the Universal House of Justice to the National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of the United States. And just as you have been, of course, studying this in the years since we first received it, we'll take a moment to go through and read it and consider for ourselves, first of all, do we understand essentially what is here? What is on the page? Are there any particular words or phrases or concepts that we find new and that maybe we need to discuss with others to find out if we can get more clarity? Maybe we have to look up something in a dictionary because we're just not quite sure what that means. And then at the other part of our consideration is the idea that we want to make sure that we know how to apply what it is that we've been studying. What is the application of this to my current service and where I happen to live in the world and the people with whom I serve? And then, of course, we're always extending this very globally. What's the implication of this? Could this actually, in some way, transition or transform the society in which I live and ultimately the world which is ours today? So the House of Justice writes, devotional gatherings, for example, steadily multiply to include all of the believers in a cluster, as well as many of their associates. The teaching work is broad in scope, encompassing personal efforts as well as collective projects, selected neighborhoods, as well as sundry localities, chosen populations, as well as chance acquaintances, firesides, as well as core activities. In this manner, the participation of more and more believers in the community building activities of the plan has profound implications at the level of culture. Devotional gatherings, the embryo of the local magical askar, kindle the stirrings of the spirit and ignite the flame of service. Visiting one another's homes weaves bonds of love and union. Teaching becomes a way of life. And so when we read that, first of all, we probably say, well, I want to live here. This is a wonderful cluster because the devotional character, of course, is steadily increasing and it's multiplying to include all of the believers and many of their associates. But it's also a place in which we can see that the expression of our devotional character and how it impacts our vibrant community life can be expressed in many, many different ways. So we see that the connected to the work of the devotional is also how teaching is expressed in many, many different ways, how it is that this process of contributing to the spiritual education of children or the empowerment of adolescents, how it is that we consider the education and service of youth and adults, all of these things are being expressed in very, very broad and wonderful ways. And we also see, of course, that firesides alongside these core activities are also present because at the same time that the core, maybe the center part of any fruit and the place where the seeds are contained, and therefore the place from which the replication actually takes place, so too the fireside will continue to be a very vital part because so many people in a community are longing to learn more about this revelation of Baha'u'llah. And they need somebody who will help them to connect to the blessed beauty, to the covenant, to the central figures and the writings of the faith, many of which are expressed through the Training Institute and others are not. There are questions that are before the community that may be very specific to this specific area. And the fireside may, of course, help families to understand a little bit more about what is the role of the faith in families? How is it that I go about my work? And what are the implications of my chosen profession if I wish to actually see the unity of mankind? So, in all of these spaces, this community is learning more and more about its ability to be transformational, not just for the individual, but for the collective as well. And we see here that because we have large scale participation, more and more believers in the community building activities, we now have this implication at the level of culture. This is the capacity to actually transform the ways in which we are thinking and behaving on a regular basis. Our culture actually shifts. And here we have this vision of the devotional gathering as the embryo of the local Mashriqal Azkar, and that we are assured that it will kindle the stirrings of the spirit and ignite the flame of service. So first of all, we might want to think about the embryo itself, and those of us who have children may be able to even, think about this on a more concrete level. And the fact that when we are aware that a life is actually coming into being, we take great care, we nurture it. We make sure that our diet is proper, the environment that we are in, we have access to clean water. To the best of our ability, we nurture this embryo so that it may grow into its fullness. And likewise, this devotional gathering also has the ability to grow into something that's quite vibrant and quite beneficial to the community, because as we can see, it's kindling the stirrings of the spirit and igniting the flame of service. In this way, The devotional gathering, of course, is intimately tied to this capacity building process that we also see expressed through the Training Institute. Because if in fact I've entered the gathering for prayer and now my spirit has been stirred and I now have a desire to serve, well, it would only be just. And I remember I was saying that the devotional gathering is foundational, perhaps, to the establishment of lasting justice. It would only be just that I have some means by which to express my desire to serve. And I have to have some means by which to grow my capacity. And therein lies the gift of the Training Institute in, as one means for us to be able to do that. We also see here something that I think we want to pay attention to as we go through a few other quotes together around the devotional gathering, and that is visiting one another's homes weaves bonds of love and union. So we are actually doing this at the level of a locality. It's close to home. In order for me to do a home visit, that means I'm actually interacting with people who are in my environment. They have homes that are somewhere near my own home. Now, I mention this because, of course, we're in the middle of a global pandemic. And while we are not able to often visit one another in the comfort of our homes because it's not currently safe, we are blessed by technology. And so we have an opportunity through telephoning, through FaceTiming, through Zooming, and all other sorts of conferencing that we have available. We're able to actually connect with each other. But we don't want to become confused at this time and believe that somehow the locality or the local nature of the devotional has been diminished. In order for the work to actually grow and develop and become something that can guide a society and have this implication at the level of culture, it actually has to take place in some locality. So, for instance, I know one way I've been thinking about this a lot is that during this pandemic period, one of my daughters has introduced me to the wonders of the Great British Baking Show. Have you watched that? It's awesome. You get to see all these wonderful British people. They're so kind. They seem very, very courteous, and they seem to be baking some really lovely and perhaps delicious foods. Now, I say perhaps delicious because by watching them, I have no way of knowing whether this is the case. When my daughter and I decided to have Great British Baking Show Wednesday, I had to actually go to the grocery store, purchase products, look for the recipe for lemon lavender scones, and then go through the process of making them. In doing that, I can now tell you that yes, they were quite delicious. However, when we think about our interactions online, we might think about the fact that while we can connect with people around the world, including through the devotional gatherings, it's so wonderful to pray together. At some point, if this is going to actually impact the level of culture, I've got to bring it home. And I have to actually try it out for myself. So we may even think in a conference like this one, it's wonderful to hear a number of speakers, and it's so lovely to exchange information across many, many miles. But then I'm also taking my notes, and I'm also trying to figure out, how do I bring this back home? Because I actually do want to see what the House of Justice is describing here. That is the ability of the devotional gathering to begin to transform the culture in the place where I live, drawing it closer and closer to the revelation of God. So, as we're thinking about devotionals, though, we might say to ourselves a very basic question: what is a devotional gathering? And while we've seen this perhaps carried out in many different ways, the House of Justice describes it in the December 29th, 2015 message this way. It says, devotional meetings are occasions where any soul may enter, inhale the heavenly fragrances, experience the sweetness of prayer, meditate upon the creative word, be transported on the wings of the Spirit, and commune with the one beloved. Feelings of fellowship and common cause are generated, particularly in the spiritually heightened conversations that naturally occur at such times, and through which the city of the human heart may be opened. By convening a gathering for worship at which adults and children of any background are welcome, the spirit of the Mashriqal Askar is evoked in any locality. So, as we inhale that particular description of devotional gathering, we can see it as simple. simplicity is definitely present there. And you can see how a gathering for prayer like this could steadily multiply to include all of the believers in a given area and a large number of their associates. Why? Well, because we don't require anything special or out of the ordinary that the residents in any given locality would not have access to. We don't have to have any kind of special housing in order to host the devotional gathering. We don't need any knowledge of a specific bank of writings that are appropriate. We don't need a special program. We don't have to be professional musicians, although, all of these things are very wonderful if we happen to live in a community where any of these elements are present. But rather, it is really the fact that in any locality, we have the ability to evoke this local Masrigal Askar, or the spirit of that, just by gathering people in a very welcoming environment. Look at that. Any soul may enter. And then what happens to that soul next? It just sounds so heavenly, right? They're inhaling heavenly fragrances, experiencing the sweetness of prayer, meditating on the creative word, and being transported on the wings of the Spirit in order that they may commune with the one beloved. And then we see how service is, of course, intimately attached to this, because we're able to generate these feelings of common cause through these spiritually heightened conversations and through which the city of the human heart is open. So therefore, when I come in, I'm able to actually express myself in this devotional. Any burden that I may be carrying, I might be able to bring it here. And with these spiritually heightened conversations, we may be able to see a path forward through prayer and also through serving together. We can see that when a group of people are consulting together in this way, praying together, reflecting on the actions that they take together, that in fact, they're able to determine the nature of their devotional gathering. Maybe you've heard it said that we have to be concerned about which cultures are becoming too dominant in a devotional character, in a devotional gathering. But actually, if we go to this level of any locality, we probably don't have to worry too much about that, because the people of that locality know their own culture. They know the language that they would like to speak. They know whether there are specific musical genres that appeal to them. Are there other artistic expressions that help them to draw nearer to God? All of those things can be answered and can be consulted on and reflected on at the level of the locality. It's much, much harder when we try to do that from the level of a nation or a continent or the entire world. So we can see that this group of friends who are praying together regularly and then beginning to serve together as their spiritually heightened conversations emerge, they will be able to determine these are the elements of our culture that we find very, very helpful in the creation of this devotional character that's also giving way to service. And over time, we've reflected on these things, and we find that these elements of culture actually don't help us to continue to advance. And in that way, the spirit of the Mashrigal Azkar is truly being evoked in that locality. So keeping in mind this spirit of simplicity, the fact that any soul is welcome, the fact that the conversations will become spiritually heightened and people will be able to begin addressing what service needs there are in their own community through the portal of these devotional gatherings. We want to watch just a brief excerpt, about 5 minutes, from the series A Rich Tapestry. This is a production of the National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of the United States. And this particular video series, which you can find online, helps us to see how our community building activities, as well as social action and contributions to the discourses in society, how do they help us to best be able to address issues of race and culture and make sure that our communities are rich and diverse and vibrant and just. So we'll take a look.
My favorite people! Regina is an educator, a friend, a Christian. Welcome, welcome, welcome to my home. It's so great to see you guys again.
Awareness of the spiritual reality of human beings carries with it the moral requirement that all be given every opportunity to fulfill their potential and to contribute to the advancement of civilization.
Regina and I actually met at a Taekwondo class that both of our children were in.
Her middle son, my oldest son, were actually in class together. I think they were about 4 or 5 years old.
And we would sit on the sidelines like parents do and chit-chat with each other.
And we realized that we had more in common than just Taekwondo. She was a teacher. I'm a teacher. She had all boys. I have all boys.
Joy gives us wings, joy gives us wings, joy gives us wings, joy. Probably about a year or so after we met, I began my first children's class in this neighborhood. So I called her and gave really a kind of brief explanation of what this children's class would be, that some friends were going to be getting together and we were going to be sharing with a group of children some really wonderful qualities and virtues that will really just help them to be better people. And these were based on the teachings of the Bahai faith that I had mentioned to her. And she said, okay, I'll come and check it out and see what this is all about.
So I would bring my older son, I would drop him off. I would go running, jogging, while he participated in a children's class. And eventually she said to me, you can stay. We have adult classes too. And I said, well, okay, I'll come.
And my soul's gotta have,
And my soul's gotta have
some place to stay.
some place to stay. I enjoyed the study circle. We went from one book to the next. And the next thing I know, I found myself teaching the children's class, which I really enjoy because, I enjoy kids. I do. And I enjoy sharing the knowledge.
The children's classes give the children the spiritual foundation to understand that we're all a part of this world, and that our purpose is to contribute to make the world a better place.
My oldest son, Isaiah, it started with him. He was involved with it. He enjoyed it. To this day, he still is involved with it, where he actually teaches the youth class for Miss Anita.
Rescue the oppressed, bring hope to the hopeless, shelter the destitute.
And my youngest son has Down syndrome, special needs. It's just surprising to see how much he's learned, how much he's picked up on.
I remember one time she came by, and like parents do, was sort of saying, okay, my son is being a little bit of a headache today, and she sort of needed to vent. And instead of just leaving the conversation where it was, which we often do, we hear our friends, experiencing issues and challenges, and we kind of just say, oh yeah, that's terrible, me too. I decided to invite her to pray together. So we shared a few prayers, one of which was, oh God, refresh and gladden my spirit.
And then one day she just handed me this prayer, and it was refreshing, gladden my spirits, purify my heart. It was telling me every day I need to start new, and that's, once she handed me that prayer, I kept it with me. I recited it every morning for about, I did it 9 months.
And I just feel like there was something that just shifted at that moment about our friendship from this, I don't know, worldly friendship to kind of like this spiritual friendship, where we were now two souls walking together on this path of service. But it wasn't just a path of service, just serving the community, but it was also serving our families. It was also supporting each other.
And when I had my 50th birthday party, that's the first words. Those are the first words I spoke to everybody there.
Oh God, refresh and gladden my spirit.
Purify my heart.
Purify my heart.
Illumine my powers. And I explained to them, I shared with them how it came about. How Danita shared it with me in a time that I think I was having some challenges in my life. And basically learning that prayer and believing in it, it just calmed me.
I lay all my affairs in thy hands. Thou art
my God, my refuge. I will no longer be sorrowful and grieved.
I will be a happy and joyful being. Oh God.
I will no longer be full of anxiety, nor will I let trouble harass me. I will not dwell on unpleasant things in life. I feel at home. I feel at peace. I have more peace in my life. I do.
And so there's a wonderful and simple story of prayer and how it impacts friendship, and how, again, even in the very, very smallest relationship, if you will, just between two souls, as these friends pointed out, they were able to demonstrate many of the qualities of the embryonic Master Kalaskar. This idea of worship and service being linked together, these elevated conversations and conversations that are connected then to the Word of God. As was pointed out by one of the protagonists, she could have just responded in a totally different way when her friend indicated that she had some challenges. But in this spiritually heightened conversation, she offered to her the gift of prayer. And not just the idea of prayer in the abstract, I will pray for you, or here, would you like this prayer to take with you? But rather to pray together. And I found it fascinating that the woman who received the prayer, refresh and gladden my spirit, she not only decided to pray the prayer, she actually prayed it, as she said, for 9 months straight. So as I thought about the embryo and the fact that the human embryo takes generally around 9 months gestation and before it is born as a human being, that was quite fascinating that she spent about 9 months interacting with that prayer. And then she used it when it was time for her 50th birthday, again, a very significant life event. And that was the first thing that she called on. So we could see, even in that small example, a little bit of an idea of what the House of Justice is describing here in its description of the devotional meeting. And yes, as we could have noted in that story, it didn't begin with a devotional meeting. In fact, it began with a children's class. So what happens next follows no predetermined course. But these friends became even more strongly united. And as they pointed out there, it became more than just a material friendship, it became a spiritual friendship through this gift of prayer. So we could see kind of the idea of simplicity in that particular example. Simplicity alongside the necessity for elevating conversations wherever we go and anytime we have an opportunity to do so. But a lot of people have been saying, naturally, we're in the midst of a global pandemic, and the society around us has been in a great deal of turmoil. Surely, Nwandi, you do not mean to say that devotional gatherings and the other core activities are it. And you're correct. I mean, there's a lot more to community building. When I speak of the core, again, as I said, the core is not the entire fruit, but it is the place where you're able to figure out how to replicate, how to make another fruit. So if we don't have any seeds, we have an event, and an event can be very sweet and beautiful for that one time. That's kind of like my great British baking show Wednesday. It's really not replicable. I have to go and buy all the materials again and then try again. We didn't build capacity, for instance, in our neighborhood to become excellent bakers, but it was fun. In our case, as those who are interested in transforming the world, though, and particularly those of us perhaps that are living here in North America, and maybe even those of us who are living here in the United States, we can see that in addition to skyrocketing COVID rates and an economy that is constantly tottering, we've seen throughout this year this call for greater emphasis on racial justice. It's been before our eyes at all times. And so along this entire time during the pandemic, we've noticed that we've been receiving nonstop flows of guidance, not just here in the US, but throughout the world. The Universal House of Justice has been with us. We remember at Nowruz when we were very confused and maybe a little afraid. The pandemic was just becoming apparent to the world. We were being locked in and we didn't know what was coming next. And then we received this message from the House of Justice, and prayer was there. Remember that when it was encouraged of us that when we found ourselves in a position where we just did not know where to turn, that we could actually join the Universal House of Justice and pray for an end to suffering. And then if we didn't feel that we were fortunate enough, we also received at Rizwan another message. And in this one, we were gaining more clarity around the idea that we had to provide clarity. The world was certainly in tumult, but it was in need of the type of clear voices that could articulate this central principle of the oneness of humanity, making it clear that there is a point around which we can all coalesce. And then, of course, here in the United States, we were blessed in July to receive a message that was written specifically to this country, and to be sure, addressing the problems that were confronting this country, as well as the opportunities that are before us. So from this message, we want to, in thinking again about this idea of the devotional gathering as the embryo of the Mashriq al-Askar, we have this vision. It says, this divine love, ignited by the word of God, is disseminated by enkindled souls through intimate conversations that create new susceptibilities in human hearts, open minds to moral persuasion, and loosen the hold of biased norms and social systems so that they can gradually take on a new form in keeping with the requirements of humanity's age of maturity. You are channels for this divine love. Let it flow through you to all who cross your path. Infuse it into every neighborhood and social space in which you move to build capacity to canalize the society-building power of Baha'u'llah's revelation. There can be no rest until the destined outcome is achieved. And so here we are again with these enkindled souls. We recognize that the word of God is actually the force that will set the heart of the world on fire. So to be able to enkindle the soul through the word of God is one of the things that we see manifest in a devotional gathering, right? It's this close association in a regular space for communion with the word of God. Now, by disseminating this through these enkindled souls, and of course, we know when something is enkindled, it catches something else on fire. So when we think about the growth that takes place through these regular devotional gatherings, and we now have this opportunity provided to us by the National Spiritual Assembly for every Baha'i household to be the host of such a space. So every Baha'i household being this kindling, right? So it's enkindling the souls, though, through these intimate conversations, much like the women that we saw in that video clip. These intimate conversations that create new susceptibilities in human hearts, open minds to moral persuasion, and loosen the holds of biased norms and social systems. So I was reading this and thinking to myself, this is no ordinary love. And that's more than just a line from a really nice Sade song that I also like as well. But no, this is not something that you would hear described on a Hallmark card or something that's that very flat idea of love. This is powerful love. And sometimes people will think to themselves, we can't possibly be talking about just the devotional gathering, and we can't possibly just be talking about love at a time when the world is in such tumult. But look at this love. Look at the power that this love has. This is not just, like I said, this very, touch, feel love. This is actually loosening the hold of biased norms. So if we're trying to figure out about this justice that I was speaking of earlier, this lasting justice that can't be shaken and that no previous or current movement has yet been able to achieve, if we want to contribute to that, then maybe this idea that we are the channels of this divine love will become more manifest through these gatherings for prayer, these devotional gatherings, and the fact that when we really believe that this has power, then we're probably more likely to give it the attention that it deserves. And then the idea that it is flowing through us to all who cross our paths. But it's not, again, just this flat kind of I love you and then we part ways and I haven't done you any harm and that's the full extent of my love. Actually, this is talking about building capacity to canalize the society building power of Baha'u'llah's revelation. So again, we are seeing where this idea of capacity building and worship intimately wedded. The Training Institute is this reservoir, this instrument of limitless potentialities that we have for building capacity. And it's motivated by divine love. It's motivated by divine love. And often that divine love, of course, is enkindled in the devotional gathering, where the word of God is turned to again and again and again. And these elevated conversations are allowing the word of God to penetrate deeply to meet the needs that we actually have, as in the case of the women that we saw in the video. I'm having trouble with my child. Do we have faith that this friend has the capacity to use the word of God to address her own challenges? In the case of this video, this friend did have that faith in her friend's capacity. So to be able to canalize the society building power of Baha'u'llah's revelation. What happens when all of the believers in a locality and many of their friends are all engaging in this simultaneously, regular gatherings for prayer? How does that begin to shift the culture in a place? And how does that impact the society around us? We know, of course, that one way that this is helping us in terms of the place in which we live is to avoid these spaces for conflict and contention. So if nothing else that I'm able to get at this particular time, by gathering with my friends regularly and engaging with the Word of God, we are less likely to be engaging in matters that are dividing people, and more likely, of course, to be engaging in matters that are bringing them together. As you know from the writings of Baha'u'llah, he says, "Say, O people, sow not the seeds of discord among men, and refrain from contending with your neighbor. For your Lord hath committed the world and the cities thereof to the care of the kings of the earth, and made them the emblems of his own power, by virtue of the sovereignty he hath chosen to bestow upon them. He hath refused to reserve for himself any share whatever of this world's dominion. To this, he who is himself the eternal truth will testify. The things he hath reserved for himself are the cities of men's hearts, that he may cleanse them from all earthly defilements and enable them to draw nigh unto the hallowed spot, which the hands of the infidel can never profane. Open, O people, the city of the human heart with the key of your utterance. Thus have we, according to a preordained measure, prescribed unto you your duty." And so when we think about the means by which we have to carry out our duty, we might think again and again and again, and practice again and again and again, and reflect on the action we've taken again and again and again in the space of the devotional meeting, and to figure out how it is that this is opening these cities of the hearts of men, and it is also helping us to avoid sowing the seeds of discord. Again, we've been talking about these flows of guidance that have been not ceasing in any way during this period of global pandemic and social upheaval. The Universal House of Justice has kept the world very, very near. And so on the Day of the Covenant, we received a message, again, from the Universal House of Justice, drawing us very close to this eternal covenant. The fact that there will be no need for causing fractures within the Baha'i community, and God forbid, outside, right? So we want to make sure that we are contributing to that which is unifying. And this is the way that the House of Justice has indicated in part in this message, which I know you're all studying in your own communities. The House of Justice says, withal, the friends must guard against being drawn into the ultimately futile conflict and strife that characterizes so much of the discussion of the affairs of society, or, heaven forbid, allowing interaction of this type to permeate, even fleetingly, the conversations of the community. Yet such vigilance on your part in avoiding discord and in not becoming entangled in society's controversies should under no circumstances be construed as aloofness from the many pressing concerns of this time. Far from it. You are among the most active and earnest of humanity's well-wishers. But whether through deeds or words, the merit of your every contribution to social well-being lies first in your resolute commitment to discover that precious point of unity where contrasting perspectives overlap and around which contending peoples can coalesce. I appreciated in one of the studies I was in earlier today that someone pointed out that, one thing that's very clear here is that there is a precious point of unity and that I must just commit myself to discovering it. It may be elusive at times, but perhaps if I practice, this individual said, I will become better at identifying, discovering what this precious point of unity is. We know, of course, that if we prepare ourselves in this way, we're not only enabling the city of these human hearts to open, we're also allowing this divine love to flow into places that maybe it has had difficulty penetrating in the past. But because we are searching for those points of unity, we can actually allow this divine love to flow in all of the spaces that we happen to be in. Naturally, we'll have to gain some experience along the way in order to perhaps gain greater and greater degrees of comfort and fluency and so forth in doing this. But we are certain that we are going to guard ourselves against anything that would be in opposition to this. And naturally, once again, these gatherings for prayer bring people together in ways that perhaps other spaces would not. Maybe they have not yet had such an opportunity to come together with people who maybe don't agree about everything. However, they want to draw closer to the Word of God. And ultimately, they do want the same things. They want to see that their friends and family are able to work together and that they are behaving in ways that are loving and productive. And the devotional gathering is actually a precious point of unity in many communities. We know as we continued, as we were studying this message together, that the House of Justice is providing for us some indication in the earliest paragraph of the message that perhaps some of what is to come is actually going to look even more detrimental than what we've seen. And so this image to me was quite powerful, particularly as we focus our attention in this year on the Master himself, as we're focusing on the Master at all times as he is our exemplar, but particularly as we approach this holy year, we really want to think about how he describes walking in his chosen highway, for instance. His ability in another story to actually steer a ship through a storm. And the House of Justice gives us this look at our current conditions and says, it is against this background of furious storms lashing humanity that the Ark of the Cause is about to embark upon a series of plans that will carry it into the 3rd century of the Bahai era and significantly strengthen the Bahai community's capacity for realizing the society-building powers of the faith. What an opportunity in the midst of a storm. And yet, think about the role of the devotional gathering in actually ensuring that humanity is on the Ark of the Cause, is aware of the Ark of the Cause, and is not instead somewhere drifting out in the waves, being tossed and thrown about and not knowing which way to turn, falling to hopelessness and other patterns that are destructive to the lives of families and individuals and communities, just because there wasn't any awareness that there was this Ark of the Cause on which one could come and not be free from the idea that there is a storm raging, but to be surrounded by others who are also focused on this raising up of the devotional character, turning to the Word of God again and again and again, praying for one another, working with one another, and helping their communities to advance. We definitely have so many people that we can think of. We can make lists even today of those that we don't want to see left off of the Ark. And then we want to figure out how then do they draw closer and closer, and how are they actually aware that they are necessary contributors to this forward progress of civilization. And again, The devotional gathering might be just one space where we begin to make that very clear as we continue to reflect on what is to come, as we conclude the current 5-year plan that we're in and then move into the 1-year plan that is to come, followed by the very, very auspicious 9-year plan. So we know that during the coming year, we're going to be developing more and more of the skills and the qualities that we'll need for the decades to come. And in one respect, we're given this vision. The House of Justice in the same message says, meanwhile, wherever the process of growth has already been intensified, the year will be an opportunity to consolidate the achievements made during the current plan, while cultivating the conditions necessary for welcoming larger and larger numbers of souls into the embrace of a community recognized for its fortitude and outward-looking orientation. At the national, regional, and cluster levels, we look to communities of proven strength to help those with less experience, to help those in which less experience has accrued. In this year-long effort, every community must draw on whatever untapped potential it may possess and seek to overcome any obstacles that are impeding its growth, thereby preparing it for the demands to come. So in this vision that we have before us, we know that we have several tools available to ensure that we are cultivating the conditions necessary to welcome larger and larger numbers of souls into the embrace of this community. And what is this community? It's one that's recognized for its fortitude and its outward-looking orientation. Remember the description of the devotional gathering? It's a space into which any soul may enter. It's also a space where men, women, and children are actually embraced as equals, because this is one of the qualities of the Maastricht Lascar, after all. Now, we may not yet know fully how to express that, but we have to learn. And so along the way to learning, the devotional gathering is quite a space for us to say, I can welcome larger and larger numbers in, not because I know exactly how this is going to turn out, or I have so much expertise in any area, but rather because I can actually invite my friends into close communion with the Word of God. And then as we begin to pray and serve together, growing in our own capacity, we're then able to see what are the next few simple steps. And it's wonderful in this paragraph because the idea of accompaniment is very much here, right? If I already have some experience, what may I do? Well, I can help someone else. So we can see that at the national, regional, and cluster levels, those who have experience will be helping those where there is less experience. And we know that every community is going to be able to draw on its untapped potential and seek to overcome any obstacles that are impeding its growth. So we can see that preparation for the demands to come necessarily will require growth. The same number of people will not be able to guide the ark on its course. We necessarily need to extend that, in part because more workers will be able to join us in what we're trying to do, but also in part because of the storm that's raging around us. And the fact that we just can't be satisfied leaving large numbers of people out in the storm with no knowledge that there actually is a means by which we can come together, with no knowledge that they themselves are the supreme talisman, and with no ability to access this education that will enable them ultimately to reveal their full measure, the gems that are actually within them. So we're looking at this 1-year plan and then the 9-year plan after it, and the fact that we're going to continue to develop strength. And that hopefully we can see that as, for instance, the NSA of the United States asking each household to host its own devotional, the fact that we are able to use the resilience that we're discovering during this particular time, the fact that we're able to serve as beacons of hope for many who at this point maybe are saying, I don't see the hope that you speak of. We might ask ourselves, in what ways are all of these things going to help us to prepare for the demands of the time that is to come? So we don't really have all the time today to really address all the ways that these gatherings for prayer ultimately impact a cluster, a community, its ability to expand its numbers, to consolidate those that come into its embrace, the fact that social action soon begins to emerge, and that people are also able to better contribute to the discourses of society because they're no longer engaging or even prone to thinking about engaging in sort of a rancorous conference that's going on all around them. Instead, they can provide clear examples as to how the oneness of humanity will enable us to all move together collectively. And from whatever sphere of usefulness that we find ourselves, we become better and better able to do this. And the devotional gathering is very central to us being able to develop that. But hopefully, as we just give these matters some continued consideration and hopefully begin to learn in action, I know many of you already are doing this. You have devotionals with your families, you're inviting your coworkers and your colleagues. We can see from the level of the nation and from the level of the North American continent how these devotional gatherings are just growing in strength, and that we're all growing in understanding that it's not just the fact that I've held something in my home and I've been able to help people to read some of the writings, although this might be perhaps a starting point. But really, it's the connection to the Word of God that these friends are having, their natural, innate ability to connect with that, and then their natural, innate ability to want to use that in service for humanity. Rather than allowing a complaint to remain a complaint, we might say, well, that is actually an object of learning because we don't know how to overcome this particular challenge. And we never complain about things that we actually know about. So whenever we hear one of these things, whether it's, as was in the video, a mother complaining about her child, well, we want to elevate that conversation. And so we know that, in fact, the child is not something to be cast off. The mother, of course, loves her child, but then needs this connection to the Word of God, as this friend was able to do for her, in order to advance in her understanding. And likewise, we can begin to learn about that in our interactions at all levels that have to do with our interactions with the institutions of society, levels that have to do with our true quest for justice. But maybe it's good just to focus on simplicity, especially at a time of a global pandemic, right? It's not so easy to travel like we have been used to doing. Maybe it's not even so easy to take a quick walk up the block. But while we're trying to figure these things out together, while we're all anxiously praying and awaiting the coming of a vaccine and a time where people's health will be able to improve, these gatherings for prayer perhaps will be that point that we can really learn about at this time. And if we focus our attention on learning there, we can see how that touches all of the other elements of the Master Galaskar, which, as we know, begins perhaps with a gathering like a devotional or friends who gather at dawn to pray. And then, because of the way that they're able to use Baha'u'llah's revelation in the society around them, eventually in some places a physical Master Galaskar emerges. And alongside this physical expression of prayer and service are also the dependencies, right? So the ability to also think about the education and the healthcare, and how are the people who are older doing, and how is the traveler who is passing through doing. All of these actually we're practicing in this very small way, in this humble effort that we're making with our own devotional gatherings. So hopefully this will be a time where we'll learn a lot about that. We have a lot to pray for. We have a lot to be grateful for, and we are also petitioning God for his continued guidance and the continued safety and security of those around us. So maybe it'll suffice to close with these words from the writings of Baha'u'llah as we consider the opportunities we have to serve as channels of the power of divine love. Remember, again, this is not an ordinary love. This is divine love. And we want to think about the power that we have of sharing this divine love through regular gatherings for prayer. Baha'u'llah says, "Say, let truthfulness and courtesy be your adorning. Suffer not yourselves to be deprived of the robe of forbearance and justice. that the sweet savors of holiness may be wafted from your hearts upon all created things. Say, beware, O people of Bahai, lest you walk in the ways of them whose words differ from their deeds. Strive that ye may be enabled to manifest to the peoples of the earth the signs of God, and to mirror forth his commandments. Let your acts be a guide unto all mankind, for the professions of most men, be they high or low, differ from their conduct. It is through your deeds that ye can distinguish yourselves from others. Through them, the brightness of your light can be shed upon the whole earth. Happy is the man that heedeth my counsel and keepeth the precepts prescribed by him who is the all-knowing, the all-wise. And so I thank you very much for your time and for your consideration. And I hope that all of your devotional gatherings, your gatherings for prayer, and your